In December 1979, after 4 months in India, I became very sick with amoebic dysentery, foodborne hepatitis A, and dengue fever. The physical body weakened to the point where all that could be done was to lie in bed at the hotel. I had no strength left. The state of weakness was very peaceful, with an awareness that death would come soon. There was no fear, but I had an interest in what lay ahead. With a calm mind, all of the events in life that seemed so important slipped away. They had no interest anymore. A realization came that the mind and body is one complete system, not separate. Because of this weakened state, my thoughts stopped. With the filter of thoughts gone, a greater level of internal awareness arose from the heart. I had heightening the perceptions of intuition, seeing, hearing, and feeling. Even though my body was sick with fever, pain, and weakness, there was a wonderful, blissful state where every breath brought something dynamic. Everything was so still. Each breath became more pleasurable and expansive. Slowly, a gentle shaking started, even though the body was still. Memories came of having done this many times before. It was so familiar. Pleasant and loving feelings had flooded my being, and the shaking continued. I found myself looking down at this sick body and started to laugh. Soon this body would end. The thought of letting go was a pleasurable one, as releasing all the entanglements of this life neared. This body was so dense, cold and heavy. It was good to let this go. My consciousness opened like a lotus flower. Everything became vast beyond the size of this universe. Every part of the universe was part of me, and every part of me was part of the universe. There was complete inclusion and acceptance. This was so far beyond any expectation, yet at the same time familiar, hence it wasn't overwhelming. Another realization came to me. Everything is known, and there is nothing to learn. It was clearly understood that there is no heaven or hell. Life on Earth is not a school, there is nothing to learn. Life on Earth is just an experience, nothing more. Then suddenly, the fierce grip of fear engulfed me. It felt suffocating, sticky, addictive, desirable, all-consuming, and compelling. The fear started pulling me into reincarnation and away from all the inclusion and expansive awareness. Aspects of this fear included desire, suffering, and isolation. Identifying with the fear was dragging me back into an unconscious state. Watching this, Osho's words came back to me. If you can observe fear, then how can fear be part of you? By observing the fear, I could see the separation between myself and the fear. No sooner had I started to observe fear, than its grip faded and disappeared. As the fear released, it was followed by other negative emotions of despair, guilt, greed, envy, and desire for another body. This too could be observed as external addictive influences. Soon after this, all external energy stopped. The feeling of complete awareness of center had returned. My roommate was a nurse at the time, and she was with me as my body died. I watched her from a perspective outside my body. She was taking my pulse and then dropped my wrist in despair. I could also sense her thoughts. She was stressed, not because of my death, but because she was faced with dealing with my body. Looking at the body, what arose was the perfection of the life just lived. This life could not be described as pleasant though. In fact, it was filled with suffering and hardship. Yet it seemed so perfect as it was observed. Then all of a sudden, other lives started to appear in this visual format. Each life appeared in a bubble, the entire life from beginning to end in an instant, with awareness of every moment of that life as if it was just lived from birth to death. There were many, many lives, too many to count. Each one of these lives was perfect. Reincarnation is part of the human experience, but it is optional. Once I was aware of the addictions pulling me back to another life, then I was ready for what came next. There was a shift and a slight movement. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't travel 1,000 miles. It was the same place. Yet it was different, less dense and more expansive. Everything was bathed in a golden light. There were many others around me. They were all known to me, and me to them. My return was met with overwhelming rejoicing. I'd finally made it home. At the time, I didn't have words to describe the process. It was like a dimensional shift. I shifted from the third to the fourth dimension as the life left my body, with ever-expanding awareness that reached to the edge of the universe. I then shifted into the fifth dimension, where everything was illuminated and golden. Later, I heard that this is what the Tibetans call the land of the golden light. Everything was absolute perfection. A being came to me and asked me to return to the body in the hotel room. My response was, no, I don't want to leave this wondrous place. Then another being, or rather the persona of a man seated at a table at a cafe, gestured for me to sit down. He introduced himself. In my last life on Earth, I was known as George Gurdjieff. I did not know the name at the time. He continued on. We need you to go back. After my joyful reunion on this wonderful plane, I was reluctant to do so. But he asked me in such a way that I could not refuse. All this communication was without words, I might add. A thought then came to my mind. If you return, you will lose all memory of this encounter. This came from another entity that had welcomed me back. I then commenced bargaining with Gurdjieff the terms of my return. On one condition, that you don't take this memory from me, and that I retain all of this experience intact. He couldn't refuse me either, and it was agreed to let me retain this death experience. This is the last time you'll have to return, I promise. I took great comfort in what he just said. As I was guided back, first into the fourth dimension, I could feel the expanded awareness shutting down. Then I felt the re-entry into the cold, dense body. My roommate completely freaked out when I reanimated. The next thing I knew, an Indian doctor was at my side. He just walked in off the street and said, "I'll take care of you now. I'm here to help you." He brought me sugar water to get my blood pressure back up and ordered some medications. Not once did he ever ask for any money, and I never saw him again. A Spiritually Transformative Experience by Angela B. from the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation. In the middle of the night, I woke with a severe migraine. I'd experienced occasional migraine since I was a teenager, but this particular migraine was extremely painful, and I really should have sought treatment at the emergency room. However, since I had very young children at the time, I didn't want to wake them or my husband, so I attempted to treat myself. I took my prescription migraine medication, but it did not provide any relief from the pain. Instead of waiting an hour before taking the second dose as the instructions advised, I waited 20 minutes and took the second dose. I also took 2 over-the-counter pills for migraines. I've always been very sensitive to medications, but at the time I did not consider this. I was only focused on relieving this intense pain. After taking the medications, I became very sleepy and returned to bed. When I drifted off to sleep, I would awaken by gasping for breath, quickly realizing that when I drifted off to sleep, I stopped breathing. I was fearful I would fall asleep and die. Dear God, please don't let me die. I want to be a mother and a wife. I said a very simple prayer. And as I said this prayer, I doubted God would hear me. At that time in my life, I felt insignificant. I was not sure God existed, and if he did, I didn't think he would know me. But I was about to be proven wrong. Immediately after praying, I felt a presence come over my bed. I was lying on my back with my eyes closed, and I could sense a shadow had been cast as something moved over my body and then stood next to my bed. As soon as I felt the presence, I was frightened, and I heard a Bible verse in my mind. An angel of the Lord stood by them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. I realized I had received the Bible verse telepathically, and an angel had arrived to help me. It then felt as if the angel slipped his hand directly into my stomach. I felt a sensation unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. Static was moving in my stomach and throughout my torso. I also saw in my mind's eye a vision of black and white static, as if like on a TV set without reception. At the same time, I felt my deceased father's presence. I could hear him speaking into my right ear. He repeatedly said, "You're going to be okay, you're going to be okay, you're going to be okay." As the angel stood to my left and my father spoke to me from my right, a very large, powerful presence hovered over the length of my body. When I noticed the large presence, my inner vision was changed to that of a crystal blue waterfall. The water was sparkling clear and the most beautiful blue I have ever seen. As I marvelled at the sight of the water, the static sensation in my torso dissipated. It was then replaced with a sensation of liquid love rushing into my heart. The love was so pure and overwhelming that I immediately began to weep. The liquid love flowed through my heart and filled up my chest cavity to the point that I could not expand my lungs to inhale. I was aware of having difficulty breathing, but it did not concern me. I was so blissed out from the love that nothing else quite mattered. I had the realization of, this must be God. It was so large, infinite and powerful that I just knew it could have no other name than God. Once I realized I was in the presence of God, my next thought was, oh no, God is going to judge me for taking too much medication. So I waited for the judgment, yet it did not come. I moved into the flow of God, searching for his judgment. There was no judgment to be found, not a speck. Only pure, adoring love was in the infinite flow of God. At this point, I lost awareness of my body. I did not recall I was a mother, wife, daughter, or friend. I had no recollection of life on earth at all. I merged into an infinite presence that utterly and completely adored me. God did not speak words to me. The love just said it all. I felt as if I was in awareness, a being without a name or identity, and I was expanding to the size of the cosmos. I was home. I realized home was where I wanted to remain forever, and in my blissed out state, it took all the energy I could muster to telepathically communicate. Take me. And with these two words, I was attempting to communicate that I wanted to remain in this pure love forever. As my presence continued to expand in a state of bliss, I felt as if I was nearing a point where I would explode into a billion atoms and forever be with God. I mentally prepared myself for the explosion and gladly welcomed it. At the very last millisecond before the explosion of my being and my total emergence into infinity, God pulled me out of heaven, and I landed with a shocking jolt into my body. I lay in my bed, dazed and confused. My hair and pillow were soaked from the tears I had cried, as the love consumed my very heart and spirit. I truly have no idea how long I was with God, but when I returned to my body, it was completely healed. The medication had been removed. I was breathing normally, and I was not lethargic. My head felt normal. Usually after having migraines, my head would be very sore to the point that brushing my hair would be unbearable. Now I could push against my skull and feel no pain or soreness. I attempted to process what had just happened. I knew that I had experienced something beyond any earthly experience I'd ever had or heard of. I told myself that I would allow myself to believe I had experienced a miracle, if when I awoke in the morning I remained pain-free. So eventually I fell asleep, and when I awoke in the morning, my body had no after effects of a migraine or medication. I just felt wonderful. I remember standing at the mirror, brushing my hair and trying to accept all that had occurred. My best friend called me, and I told her I experienced a miracle the night before. Fortunately, she believed me, and she advised me to go to the bookstore to find a book about healing. I did as she suggested, and as I was walking into the bookstore, I realised I had no idea where to find a book that would help me. Then an image appeared in my mind. It was a poster of the cast of the TV show Touched by an Angel. I'd never watched the TV show, but I decided to go to the section of the bookstore where there were books about angels. I grabbed some books which caught my eye, and I randomly opened one of them. The first paragraph I read was about a woman who experienced a healing from an angel. She described feeling static in her body as she was being healed. I was shocked. How had I walked into the bookstore and opened a book that described exactly what I had experienced the night before? My mind was blown. It was too much to process. I spent the next few days reliving the experiences in my mind. After a few days, I accepted I had been touched by an angel, comforted by my earthly father in heaven, held in the infinite arms of God, and miraculously healed. From this point on, my life would never be the same again. A near-death experience by Ian T. On Sunday, July 17, 2022, I was out and about with my bearded dragon lizard, Lemmy. We were walking through the drainage tunnels as a shortcut to our destination. We were resting in an open part of the wash, situated directly behind the runways of North Las Vegas Airport. I was sitting back watching the small planes take off and land, while my little buddy was sitting a few feet away sunbathing. I was taking a long-awaited drink from a water bottle as I watched a small, single-engine Cessna making a right turn in my direction, preparing to land. I watched another small plane descending behind it. At least it appeared that way from my vantage point. I expected the planes to pass directly overhead of me to land, but to my horror, I watched as the planes collide mid-air about 50 feet above me. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing Lemmy, and sprinted towards the steep driveway-like slopes of the storm drain. When I heard the deafening sound of an explosion, I was thrown forward with tremendous force while pelted by small pieces of shrapnel. I went unconscious as I hit the ground. When I regained consciousness, I saw nothing but a dark tunnel. I thought I imagined the whole incident and looked around for Lemmy, but it wasn't there. I freaked out and ran towards the end of the tunnel, being blinded by an intensely bright light. Then, I found myself in a different location. I was in a grassy oasis type of place. This confused me as I was greeted by a strange robed figure who led me down a path to a field. Numerous people were sitting there, and I recognized my grandmother, great aunt, and a close family friend of mine, all of them having died when I was younger. "Who are you?" I asked the robed figure, and instead of getting an answer, everyone else was asking me what I was doing there so early. "I don't know," I replied. I relayed the story that there was a crash, I passed out and woke up somewhere else without Lemmy. I asked if they had seen him and demanded that I get to him. The robed man placed one hand on my forehead and everything became blurry and dark. I opened my eyes. This time, I found myself on the ground and in a lot of pain. As I stood up, I saw the burning wreckage of the small Cessna about 20 feet away from me. The pungent smell of burning flesh and metal was very strong. I frantically looked around for Lemmy and found him a few feet away from me. I picked him up and dialed 911. I explained the situation while cautiously inching closer to the burning wreckage. I wanted to see if anyone had managed to survive. It was so horrible that although it will forever be ingrained in my memory, some things are just better left unshared. I suffering a broken knee and a fractured wrist, while Lemmy suffered a broken forelimb and a spinal displacement. Both of us spent a day in the hospital, and the nurses were so nice to me and little Lemmy. They even made him his own little splint for his arm. In the end, we were okay, but I wish I could say the same for everyone else. The air collision resulted in 4 fatalities. I was met by journalists for an interview, but I declined due to the severe aftershock of the experience. A near-death experience by Harry T. My wife travelled to Atlanta from our home in Maryland to celebrate Thanksgiving with her parents. I flew home to MD, leaving her there, to return to my job at the USCG Intelligence Coordination Center in DC. On December 8th, 2019, I finished dinner and bent over to place the dishes in the dishwasher, when I felt my chest compress and grew dizzy. Thinking I was having an asthma attack, I went to the living room, turned around to sit on the couch and passed out. I believe I died. I suddenly was aware that I was in a place surrounded by bits of light. I saw, felt and experienced myself spread eagle, rotating slowly counterclockwise while the bits of light were relating my life. The bits of light closest to me were my parents, grandparent and family who had all passed before, and connected to them farther away were close friends, and connected to them were people who had influenced me and whom I had influenced, student, acquaintances, etc. And the people whom they had interacted with, but unknown to me, but connected to me by my interaction with everyone I had known and met in my life and had gone on before. All of those bits of life were relating how my life and actions had affected theirs. A cacophony of words and stories, but each understandable and distinct at the same time. I was not feeling fearful nor distressed, but was actively engaged in hearing not so much with my ears, but my whole body and my soul. In that moment, I was not bewildered. Rather, I was accepting this as what was necessary, what I needed to do. I have no comprehension for how long I was experiencing this relation of my life. However, at one point, a brilliant flash of light, an all-encompassing light and voice bellowed, "Not yet. Go back. Call 911. Whereupon all the bits of light repeated, "Call 911, over and over and over again. I next found myself half on, half off the couch in my living room. It took me a few minutes to regain control of my body enough to enable me to sit upright enough to grab at my phone on the coffee table. After a number of these attempts, I was able to get my phone, and again, with a few more attempts and with great difficulty, I managed to call 911. When I got through, I told the dispatcher I couldn't breathe and was having a severe asthma attack. The paramedics came, placed me on backboard and then a stretcher, transporting me to our local hospital. After a CT scan, the emergency room doctor placed me on heparin drip and had me flown by helicopter to George Washington University Hospital with a saddle pulmonary embolism. I was in ICU there for 4 days, the first 3 of which I was forbidden to move, eat or talk unnecessarily, for fear of dislodging the embolism. I do continue to wonder why I was sent back at all. The Shared Death Experience by Angel G. This is about my wife Vera Gonzalez, who passed on May 7, 2016. The attending physician assistant and I witnessed a light orb leave her body within minutes of dying. A concentrated white orb light came out of her chest through the sternum, rose and hovered momentarily, and then departed the room while accelerating. I truly thought I was imagining things until the physician assistant asked me if I saw the light as well. He said he had seen it before, and it was Vera's spirit. He also said he sensed a great deal of holiness in the room, as I did too. I'd been praying the last rites to Vera before her death. I'm Christian, but of Jewish descent, Sephardic, and the nurse practitioner is Jewish. Vera was a strong, faithful Christian. Days prior to dying, Vera told me and our children that an angel had visited her. She had gone through a tunnel that opened up into light. There she had seen her deceased relatives, including her dad, brother and grandmother. She pleaded with the angel to let her live, to be with our children, but the angel told her she could not live and her time was near. She begged and pleaded, so he then showed her the future of our children and mine. Several of the things she told me were to come have actually come true. She was not allowed to share the details of my future and passing, but I inferred from her love. She shared the future of our children and things I must do, which right now I am doing. She pleaded so hard to live that the angel came back a second time and told her she would be allowed to live in between the here and there, as an angel watching over our children. Ever since then, I have been travelling and telling this to whomever will listen, including the dying and clergy. I've shared it with Jewish rabbis, many Christian clergy of different denominations, as well as Catholics, Muslims, and you name it. Ever since that day, my life has been changed forever. A Near-Death Experience by Cassandra A. Taken from the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation.org. I went into this psychedelic journey, as I had with the many other journeys I always have, with a sense of incredible responsibility, respect, intention, and oversight. I started using mushrooms and MDMA as a medicinal tool for my CPTSD a few years prior to this experience. There was never an air of recklessness, haste, or foolish partying. I sourced my medicine from trusted, tested people. On the day my NDE happened, I'd set my room to support the journey. I had all my supplements, water, noise-cancelling headphones, eye mask, maps playlist, and etc. Mushrooms are not a drug where you wake up naked in the road wondering how you got there. While I do hallucinate, I have the self-awareness to know that I am hallucinating, and the great privilege of enjoying it during the experience. I took the mushrooms and did take a somewhat higher dose than normal, but I was prepared to go deeper than ever before. I went into this trip with the intention of diving into my mother trauma. I was born on drugs and alcohol to a very young mother who didn't want me. I wasn't physically held much the first 6 months, and had failure to thrive syndrome amongst other issues. I was adopted at age 6 months, and the mother-daughter relationship wasn't much better. The mushroom trip gave me a beautiful vision of billions of women throughout all of time going through this funnel of abuse that so many of us suffer. We are products of our parents who are products of their parents, and the generational abuse and trauma extends millennia. I felt empathy and compassion for the women in my life that I hated and resented. When I take mushrooms, it's somewhat of a roller coaster, or maybe better, a book chapter. There are waves, depths I go in and out of. Sometimes I'm very aware of the world around me, and other times I'm diving into a vision or hallucination. I can recall every journey I've been on. For me, they transition beautifully and gently. While I was feeling empathy, compassion, and hallucinating this funnel of women throughout history, I suddenly felt myself abruptly leaving my body. Even so, it still was gentle. I understood what was happening, although I'd never personally felt or experienced leaving my body before during a journey. I was very confused. It felt like I was unwillingly pulled from the gentle roller coaster I was on. I believe this is where I stopped breathing, although I did not realise I wasn't breathing at all. I floated out of my body, wondering where I would end up and why I was there. I floated to an incredible room. I use the word room for lack of a better word because there were no boundaries or defined walls. I was just infinitely there. In this room, I felt love and peace like I'd never felt before. Everything was the most beautiful golden light. I knew many people who were with me, despite the fact that they didn't have faces, but they did have auras. I could feel their presence and could absolutely feel their love. I greeted them and looked around in awe. I knew they were the spirit guides of the universe, and I know they created it. All of a sudden, I was angry because I felt like I had no choice being there. Then, I remembered feeling surprised but also empowered as I started lecturing these spirit guides. Funny, in hindsight really. I told them it was truly unfair to bring me into a world and subject me to such pain and trauma. I told them that I was just suddenly here and had to survive what felt like endless abuse. The spirit guides were never angry, they simply held space for me and agreed with me. Although this confused me a bit. I felt exasperated at the end of my rant, expecting some explanation. Instead, they told me they understood and I could stay with them if I wanted to do so. Of course, I enthusiastically agreed to stay. I was in endless light, love and peace that I felt so much that it was as if I could explode. They said great, but they did need to let me know what would happen if I died. In that moment, a million moments happened in seconds. I was suddenly in the fetal position with a massive sphere like a tornado all around me, full of the people in my life who loved and needed me the most. I saw my funeral, I saw their grief. I saw my husband finding my body in his pain. I saw the life of my daughter who would never get to be here. And while this tornado was circling around me, it was showing me vision after vision. I looked up through it all to the guides and told them I could not stay. In that moment, I was violently thrust back into my body. When it had felt like life was in slow motion, suddenly life was going 10 million miles an hour. Back into my body and back into reality. I immediately pushed up off my stomach on my arms and took a massive breath. One of the things with mushrooms, I can't really sober up. I started this journey on my back with no recollection of turning over onto my stomach. When I pushed up on my arms and off my stomach, I knew I'd messed up. I felt sober, which is not normal, and then immediately called my husband. I could see clearly, which is another thing that's not really possible on mushrooms. I told him I was okay, but I could not find my heartbeat. My entire body was blue. I asked him to come home. I rubbed my body vigorously and apologised profusely for what I had done. I didn't want to die. It was a terrifying feeling knowing I'd really put myself in danger. My husband came home and struggled to find my heartbeat as well. After a while, he eventually found a faint heartbeat which was abnormal for me. I have a very strong heartbeat, easily found in many areas. After about 20 minutes, I felt safe, and then my mushroom journey resumed. This was unexpected and odd though. Unfortunately, it was incredibly rough and painful. There were no gentle hallucinations and feelings of love and beauty. Everything was cold, clinical, and massively pixelated. It was as if the world was glitching in a very seizure-inducing way. I couldn't close my eyes, but I couldn't open them either. I've never had a journey like that, and it was a brutal few hours afterwards. I spent the next couple of weeks with severe body aches. I was exhausted and drained despite supplements and attentive self-care. The only thing I was able to figure out was that I had turned over at some point and ended up in a crevice of the air mattress where I was unable to breathe. Or maybe I was rebreathing air. I like my air mattresses half inflated, so there was lots of give. Regardless, somehow, my body had stopped getting the oxygen it needed, which started my NDE. I was not on a massive dose of mushrooms, so it's interesting that I did not notice there was an issue. I still had the ability to assess danger while under the influence, even if it is dulled. I do not regret this, and have since taken the mushrooms many times, although never alone. I am incredibly grateful for my experience. In a way, I gave the universe and myself the consent to be in my body. This is something I felt I never had the chance to give before. A near-death experience report, posted by Aradai to the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation. At the time of my experience, I was a workaholic. On top of my regular 40 hours a week of work, I was developing a forensic project along with the government in order to find missing or dead people in my country. This took another 20 to 30 hours of my week. I also practiced martial arts and lifted weights when I wasn't occupied with my friends. I was so busy that I was completely unaware of my health issues. The final straw was a fight with a person from the government who was helping me to develop the forensic project. I spiraled emotionally and I started to go to therapy. I realised that I was living a life that was not sustainable. Nothing made sense to me anymore. So, on October 18th, 2021, I abandoned the project, left my job, stopped exercising, and ended a relationship. That night, I went to sleep at 12 AM. I remember arriving in an empty place. There was literally nothing. No space, no time, no sky, no floor. Suddenly, I became aware that there was someone standing on my left side, and we started walking through a gallery. There were an infinite number of squares with a path in the middle. Each square had scenes from my life that were playing simultaneously. Each square had depth and colours of red, orange, and yellow. The entity with me started explaining what was happening. I felt completely at peace with myself. I felt that no matter what, that everything was okay, and that nothing could hurt me. Then, we started entering those squares from the gallery one by one. I remember one of the scenes from one square was from a time when I was a child. We went inside this square, and suddenly I gained complete awareness of the situation. My grandma was beating me. I was on the floor, but also, I was somehow inside of everything, like I was in another dimension itself. I had this 360-degree perspective going on. Then I noticed that the being next to me had no shape, but it was made of light. I could see the golden threads of reality. I could feel everything. I felt the beating and the pain I endured. I felt the rage of my grandma. This made me quite sad, although everything was fine, and somehow nothing could affect me. I never thought that someone could feel that way towards me. At the same time, the being was explaining to me what was happening. After the scene ended, we went outside and repeated the same activity in each of the squares until we reached the end. I then began to see a square materialise in front of me, and I saw a couple and the back of a man. I was ready to enter the square alone. Suddenly though, I was in another place. I don't know how I arrived there or why it even happened, since I was ready to enter what, I guess, was my next life. Yet, I was standing in front of Vishnu. He was seated on grass in the lotus pose and wearing only a brown loincloth. Behind him there were clouds. The sky was pink and gold in colour. At that moment, I experienced a feeling that I cannot describe, because I have never experienced it here on Earth. I felt absolute peace. There was no pain, no suffering, and everything was fine. He explained to me that I was in a place that was above good and bad. Those things I saw are human, but do not exist. He showed me pain, which seemed like a separate dimension, which is dark and heavy. He also told me that he doesn't need sacrifices, nor any kind of ritual, and that we are actually free. We're free to do whatever we want, whatever that is, because ultimately, it doesn't matter. He was holding a wooden spoon on his right hand and a white flower on his left hand. He had no navel. He didn't use words to communicate, and somehow it was all knowledge that I was receiving. Vishnu's eyes were bigger than those from a human, and his body was thin, long, and deep blue. His skin seemed thick and dry. When I started making sense of everything, his face changed. At first, the face resembled that of my therapist. Then, it looked like my face, and then looked like other people. The face wasn't changing shape, but I could see how others resemble him. So, I asked him who he is. He told me, while giving me a peaceful smile, that he is all of us. He then asked me if I wanted to come back. I understood that somehow we come to Earth to experience everything there is to experience, such as pain and suffering, happiness and pleasure. And this is because those things don't exist there. These things we experience on Earth are not real. As he smiled at me, I opened my eyes and realised that I wasn't breathing. I stared at the ceiling while I could feel air slowly entering my lungs, while the feeling of peacefulness vanished. I grabbed my phone and see that it's 1 a.m. I remained silent about the experience because I didn't know what had happened or if I was hallucinating. Then, I started getting sick. The doctors found a cancerous tumour in my ovary. I went through surgery to remove it. During surgery, I was dead for a few seconds and went to a peaceful place with grass. I was playing with a child, but was awakened by the anesthesiologist shouting my name and repeatedly slapping my face. That's how I realised that I may have been dead in October 2021. I started researching and found in Hindu mythology the very places I remember seeing in my experience. My psychologist says that maybe it was something I already knew and that's why I imagined it. But I don't think so, because I grew up in an extremely Catholic family. Logic tells me that I should have seen Jesus in my hallucination, or something Christian instead of Vishnu. Anyways, the doctors found a benign mass growing in my uterus. I'm healthy. I went back to the project and I'd finished it. Now, I want to focus more on enjoying life, the good and the bad. Sometimes I think that not everybody should have those experiences that I went through, because they would take advantage of the knowledge and do ugly things if they knew what I knew. I now live my life more responsibly since my experience. I take accountability for my actions, and I avoid hurting others. I also defend myself more. This whole experience changed me, and when I discovered that other people have had them, I felt validated. I don't fear death anymore. A report taken from the Near Death Research Foundation by Tim. July 26, 2019. Dawned with the promise of a perfect summer day. The sun hung high in the sky, casting its brilliant rays over the coastline, as if nature itself conspired to create a memorable experience. That day, I decided to head to the beach with two of my dearest friends, Sarah and Michael. The anticipation had been building for weeks, and we couldn't wait to revel in the simple joys of sand, surf and sun. The beach, a place we held in reverence, unfolded before us like a tranquil paradise. Golden sand stretched out as far as the eye could see, kissed by the gentle caress of the azure waves. We set up our beach haven with umbrellas, blankets, and a cooler filled with ice-cold beverages. Music filled the air, providing a soundtrack to our day of leisure. As the hours drifted by, we found ourselves immersed in laughter and heartfelt conversations. The contents of our cooler seemed to multiply, and we savoured each sip of our chosen libations. The world outside our beach having become a distant memory, we revelled in the sheer joy of being alive and surrounded by the best of company. As the sun began its slow descent towards the horizon, casting an amber glow over the beach, we decided it was time to embrace the cool embrace of the ocean. The waves beckoned us with their tantalizing allure, and we waded into the water, letting the gentle ebb and flow soothe our senses. Perhaps it was the heady combination of sun, fun, and the refreshing sea, but we ventured farther from the shore than we'd initially planned. The waves, initially playful, grew stronger and more unpredictable with each passing moment. Yet we felt invincible, caught in the euphoria of the day. It was in this moment of reckless abandon that disaster struck. An enormous wave, as if summoned by the sea gods themselves, crashed upon us with ferocity we couldn't have foreseen. Panic surged as the unforgiving waters pulled us under, drowning our laughter and carefree spirits in an instant. Amid the chaos and darkness, as my body struggled against the relentless currents, my consciousness began to drift away. I felt weightless, as if I were being carried by an unseen force. It was then that I saw it, a brilliant tunnel of light, radiating warmth and serenity. It was a beacon of hope, drawing me toward it with an irresistible pull. As I entered the tunnel of light, I was bathed in a profound sense of love, peace, and joy. It was as if the light itself held the secrets to the universe, whispering promises of boundless understanding and unity. In that luminous embrace, I felt a profound connection to everything that had ever existed. A love beyond measure, a peace beyond description, and a joy that transcended earthly experiences. I wasn't alone in this celestial passage either. Beside me there was a presence, gentle and reassuring. It was my spirit guide, a being who had journeyed with me throughout my life, offering guidance and protection in ways I had scarcely comprehended. In this timeless place of light and love, my spirit guide wordlessly conveyed a sense of purpose and guidance. We moved together through the tunnel of light, leaving behind the confines of the physical world and entering a realm of pure spiritual energy. Emerging from the tunnel of light, I found myself standing before a magnificent structure, a Roman-style building of grand proportions. Towering pillars adorned with intricate carvings rose into the heavens, and the air was thick with an otherworldly serenity. A soft golden light enveloped everything around it, infusing it with a sense of divine beauty. And before me, 3 ancient and wise beings stood in solemn welcome. Their eyes held the wisdom of epochs, and their presence radiated an awe-inspiring authority. Although their gaze was penetrating, it was also imbued with an extraordinary compassion and understanding. It was as if they had been waiting for me, with knowledge of my very essence. Without uttering even a single word, they delved deep into my soul. Their scrutiny was thorough, revealing facets of my existence I had barely acknowledged. They unraveled the tapestry of my life, inspecting my choices, my joys, my sorrows, and my aspirations. In their presence, I felt an overwhelming sense of introspection, as though my entire existence was laid bare before them. As I watched the events of my life unfold before me, I felt an inexplicable connection to each moment, no matter how significant or seemingly inconsequential. The moments of kindness and compassion radiated with a profound light, illuminating the path of my journey. However, there were also moments of selfishness, hurt, and indifference, which cast shadows upon the tapestry of my life. I experienced a life review, a journey through my own history, guided by the wisdom of these ancient beings. Each memory contained not only the events themselves, but also the emotions, intentions, and consequences that had flowed from them. It was a revelation of interconnectedness, a realization that my actions rippled through the lives of others and reverberated through the cosmos. In this sacred process, I gained a deep and profound understanding of the interconnectedness of all beings and the power of our choices to shape the world around us. It was a reckoning with the impact of my actions and the opportunities for growth and transformation that they offered. Just as I began to feel the weight of their scrutiny, the 3 wise beings shared their collective wisdom with me. Their communication transcended the limitations of language, as their thoughts and insights flowed into my consciousness with perfect clarity. They imparted truths that transcended the boundaries of human comprehension. I felt as though the very secrets of the universe were being unveiled before me. I was filled with a profound sense of connection to the cosmos, a feeling of oneness with all of existence. It was a revelation that expanded my understanding of reality beyond measure. These ancient beings were not judges in the conventional sense. Rather, they were guides and mentors, offering wisdom and insight to aid in my spiritual growth. Their presence conveyed a profound sense of compassion and a desire to assist in my journey toward greater understanding and enlightenment. But as swiftly as I had arrived in this ethereal realm, I felt myself being drawn away from the presence of these ancient beings, back once again to the world I had always known. Their parting gaze held a promise of transformation and a charge to carry their wisdom with me. In an instant, I was once again engulfed by the turbulent waters of the ocean, struggling for breath and life. As I broke through the surface, gasping for air, I realized I had been granted a second chance. I had been given the opportunity to carry the lessons from the other side back into the world of the living. The experience left an indelible mark on my soul, a reminder of the profound mysteries that lie beyond our mortal understanding. I knew that my encounter with those wise beings in the Roman-style building, preceded by the tunnel of light and the presence of my spirit guide, had forever altered the course of my life. As I lay on the beach, my friends rushing to my side, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude for the second chance I had been given. I knew that I had been touched by something greater than myself, something that transcended the boundaries of time and space. From that day forward, I embarked on a journey of self-discovery, seeking to live a life that aligned with the wisdom I had received on the other side. I carried the lessons of compassion, understanding and interconnectedness with me, knowing that they truly held the key to a more meaningful existence. In the years that followed this, I found myself drawn to the study of philosophy, spirituality, and the mysteries of the universe. I shared my near-death experience with others, hoping to inspire them to seek a deeper understanding of life's mysteries and to embrace the beauty and wonder of existence itself. My encounter with the three wise beings in the Roman-style building was a reminder that life is a precious gift, a fleeting moment in the grand tapestry of the cosmos. It was a reminder to live each day with purpose and gratitude, to cherish the moments of connection, and to strive for a deeper understanding of the mysteries that surround us. In the end, my near-death experience was not just a brush with death, it was a journey to the other side, a glimpse into the infinite, and a profound awakening to the beauty and complexity of our universe. It was a reminder that in the end, the most important thing we can do with our lives is to seek knowledge, understanding and connection, and to carry the wisdom we gain on our journey with us, wherever we may go. I was asleep on my bed after taking 8 tablets. They were prescribed by my doctor, and I didn't realise that it was 8 per day, not 8 all at once. I experienced a sort of light sleep that culminated with a sensation of breaking into a million particles. I could sense that my body was still in the bed, and I was sort of above it, but only just. It was a sensation of separation from the physical body, but still being fully aware of my essence. During this stage, my aura, as I will call it, was intermingling with a friend who was asleep next to me on my bed. I was communicating with the aura of my friend who was beside me. It was like our auras were a culmination of all our many lives and experiences since being on Earth and the beginning of time, from the caveman days right up till now. I could tell which gene pool he stemmed from, and also my own. As my friend was only sleeping, I took this as a sort of force field that we all have, something that we are all connecting with amongst each other, even if we don't realise it. Then, I was flown around the world at a great speed. It was pulling me around by my solar plexus region. I had no body at this stage, but I'm still a soul, and I also know this. When my journey around the Earth had reached above Indonesia, as I was flying around the equator, which was sort of like looking at a Google Earth map, I was sucked into a tunnel, although it didn't have sides, so to speak, just a feeling that I was being drawn up to the next level. And there, I was greeted by a light being, although I don't remember flying into a light as such. I knew this soul, and was guided around the place. I was shown rooms and doorways, mostly which contained other souls learning things and preparing for their return to Earth, or wherever their next journey was to be. I also saw souls who I would call angels, or higher beings. They were helping Earthlings with many problems, even medical discoveries. I was taken to many different levels by this friend, and learnt that anything is possible in this place. I can't really remember most of the levels, as each one seemed more complex than the last, but I do remember the lower levels, so to speak. I'm sure I was taken to higher places, but I'm not to remember these places as my life here would actually be affected by them. I think there may be about 7 or possibly more, but I only have a basic memory of about 3 or 4 of them. I was taken before God, who was just as I imagined. A bright light being so brilliant it was like nothing I'd ever seen. We had met before, in a human form, but nobody so to speak of, approximately 8 feet tall and made from pure love and light. We communicated telepathically, and every question I had was answered, although I don't remember exactly what I even asked. I was shown a movie of my life from start until, well, just before. It was so fast and yet so precise. I was asked if I would change anything, which I answered, well, yes, of course. He also asked me questions too, like was I happy with my life, to which I replied that I was. I was left with a feeling inside as to how much good I'd given and how much bad I'd given. I was told this would be the feeling I'd be left with whilst there. My feeling, thankfully, was not bad, but it wasn't extremely great either. It was a slightly nervous feeling, but one that I could be satisfied with. I'm imagining that if you are mean and awful throughout your life, that this is the feeling you'll be left with whilst transitioning to the next place. Even though this place was so very wonderful, and sort of felt like home, to which most people could never imagine or want to leave, I asked if I could go back to Earth. God asked me why, and I told him that my kids were asleep in the next room, and I would never forgive myself if they had to wake in the morning and find their mum dead. The previous year, their father had committed suicide, and if they had to grow up with a mum who had a drug overdose and a dad who committed suicide, then they would think that no one loved them enough to be around, which was so far from the truth. My every particle was aching with this thought. I was allowed to come back. There was no begging or pleading, it was like it was what I wanted so much, and unselfish that I'd given it to me. I'm so thankful for that. And I was told that if I was to come back, I would have to forget what I'd learnt on the other side, as it would interfere with my whole life. I was sent back so quickly through the soles of my feet, and I awoke a few hours later. That was another really fascinating near-death experience report. I just want to add a few more little tidbits that the interviewer asks the woman at the end of the report. If you're actually interested in reading this yourself, I definitely suggest checking out the link in the description and checking out the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation.org in general. It's really quite intriguing, some of the mystical experiences that these people have that also relate to the psychedelic trips that I talk about. There's so many different parallels between them all that it really does pay dividends to actually look into this yourself and sort of grok it via your own mind, because I know that there's And there's a lot of people who just listen to the reports I share and just the experiences I share on here, but nothing beats actually reading it yourself and taking it in directly, I believe. Although everybody's different and consumes information in a different way, so if you just listen to them, then fair enough. So I'll just leave you with these two really interesting elements that they discussed at the end of it. So the interviewer asks, "Did scenes from your past come back to you?" To which Linda replies, "My past flashed before me. Out of my control, I saw everything from birth till then in fast motion. Also, whilst this was happening, I could feel the feelings of these events. I could also feel any pain I gave out to others. Also, goodness I'd given out. God asked if I was happy with how things went, and I said yes. He asked me how I felt, and I said a little nervous. He explained that this was because all my life I felt this way, and it is sort of what I didn't handle properly. I was also told that if the bad outweighed the good you have done, your feelings you're left with is bad. So if you're a truly awful person, you'd be feeling quite awful for your time there. Alternately, if you had given out love and goodness and been kind and caring, you'd be up there feeling sheer bliss and good for yourself. I was feeling no extreme sense of badness, for lack of a better word. I was feeling happy, light and carefree, but a little nervous inside, like you've just been over a hill too fast or ridden a roller coaster. But overall, the balance seemed fair and just enough for what I'd just been shown. Mostly good stuff outweighed the bad." In the section concerning our earthly lives other than religion, the interviewer asks, "During your experience, did you gain special knowledge or information about your purpose?" "Yes, I came to understand that we all choose to come to Earth to fulfill a plan of some sort or even learn about a particular interest. We choose our body's parents and life plan. May I also add that some people come here for the most simple of reasons, to learn how to play tennis for example, or simply for the cake and food. And as silly as this sounds, our life plans aren't so high and lofty as one might think. I didn't meet any save-the-worlders or anyone wishing to be a president. Most had simple wishes. I was also told that we could exist on different planes for other lives, but for our life here on Earth, this is a life not purely to experience physical pleasure or pain, but to have a physical experience because in all other planes we don't need a body as a vessel. I also learned that this life here is just a drop of water in the bucket of lives in which we all experience. Many here on Earth, and many in other realms of existence. All to progress and grow in some particular way. The main purpose here is to love. I was also told that this would be my last life here on Earth, as there would be nothing left for me to learn by coming here again. I had the feeling, though, that I'd be off to some other magical place after this. Is there anything else that you would like to add about your experience? People often would like to know if you had been to a place of such wonder, then why would you want to come back here? I had to come back, and it was jointly decided between God and I that it was in the best interest of my two sleeping children who would find my dead body when they woke up, and as their father had only passed away a year ago, they would be orphans. I had no one who would care for them in my life, and they would not have survived. So I'm actually here to look after the kids. I was told that when they no longer needed me, and when the kids of mine were married, they would come back for me, and when I say they, I'm assuming it is the angels, although I'm really not sure. An NDE report from the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation. A friend persuaded me to submit this account, against my natural tendency on the matter. I have no real interest in following it up or being contacted in any way. It was a very frightening episode. It is traumatic enough, to be honest, to recall it just once at length here. But having set out to describe it, I'll be as frank and as accurate as language can allow. On the 15th of July 2013, at about 7:45 AM, I was on my way to work and approaching the intersection, getting ready to take a left-hand turn. This is a notoriously dangerous intersection on any day. There have been many accidents there, It's hard to see if the intersection is clear from the right, and the left turn is particularly hazardous. I was running late and in a flustered state of mind. I had an important meeting that I'd been planning for carefully over a number of days, and a really stupid delay at the last minute put all of that in jeopardy. It should also be understood that a much better traffic signal system exists there today than was in place at the time of this incident. I approached the intersection in a hurry. I looked to the right and believed that I'd correctly viewed that nothing was approaching from the right, so I made the left turn. As I crossed the intersection, I glanced right once more and saw a vehicle heading straight for me at what could only have been in excess of 90 miles per hour. We saw each other. I saw the look in the other guy's eyes because we were that close. A collision was absolutely inevitable. There is just no way on earth that it could have been avoided. What happens next is extremely difficult to describe in words, but I will do my best. And this can be, and must be, taken to apply to everything that I'm going to attempt to relate from this point onwards. Words, even the most carefully chosen words, capture no more than 1% of this experience at best, and even then, very poorly. This is quite possibly the most frustrating thing about giving this whole account. Across from the front of the car on the left, in almost the opposite direction to the oncoming vehicle, was a field. I suddenly became aware of a very large object approaching slowly on a diagonal across this field. It was coming directly towards my car. Time was not functioning normally while this was happening, if it was even functioning at all. I had the space to notice this happening, but I can't explain how I was able to do that. The object, when I first saw it, appeared to be about the size of a 10-floor tower block. It subjectively seemed to be about 200 or 300 yards across the field. These size and distance descriptions are meaningless though, as I'll try to explain in a moment. The object resembled a giant water wheel lying on its side and rotating as it approached me in my vehicle. As it got closer, this didn't take time as we understand it. I saw that my first observation about its size was wildly inaccurate. It was more like the size of a small city. As it got closer still, I understood that all scale and distance estimates were meaningless. It was larger than what we think of as the world. As it approached me, I became aware of its power and significance. My mind interpreted this as being an up-close, giant-scale physical object. Okay, now this part is particularly difficult to explain. As the object drew near to me, a kind of sensation came over my person, and I knew exactly what this thing really was. Not only that, but I knew everything that pertained to it. What it was doing, what its business was with me, where and when I had seen it before, why I was seeing it now, and many, many other things that I cannot now recall. I had seen this object before I was born, and I will see it again when I die. In fact, we all knew it before we were born. We will all see it when we die. However, this information is eclipsed from us while we are alive, and that was why I was seeing it now in the experience, because I was in the process of dying in a fatal car crash. Here's what I can remember, as best as words can tell. This wheel wasn't something that moved towards me through the world, or through reality somehow. That was an illusion that my senses were constructing for me. The wheel was reality itself. It represented every conceivable possibility for a life or for a world that could ever be envisioned or imagined. As it approached, I became aware that what we call our world was contained within it. It was simply one of the numberless slots or paddles in the water wheel. It had always been so. My life, your life, our world, all of us, We were a part of this wheel structure, and we had always been a part of this structure. It simply now made itself visible to me. There then began the truly terrifying dimension of this experience. Words cannot even begin to describe the level of fear I experienced. The water wheel sort of rolled across me, and then across the place where my car was in the road. As it did so, I began to be hit by each of the paddles in the wheel. Remember that all of this is just a way of talking. It does not and cannot remotely describe the real situation as it actually was, but some sense of it can be had by imagining that in the space of each paddle there was a kind of spinning film of water, like a waterfall on its side. Imagine a film of water being thrown outward from the wheel in each slot, as if by centrifugal force. Imagine being slapped or splashed by each of these films as you collide with it and pass through it to the next one. This is what was happening. Except these weren't just films of water. They were, for want of a better term, possible realities, what we might think of as universes or worlds. Again, our world, our entire universe as we normally think of it, was simply one among an infinite number of these. How did I know that there was an infinite number? Well, I just did. A kind of knowing came with the event, and there was no doubting this knowing. It was so, and I knew it was so. And because I had knowledge and understood what was happening in ways I can no longer communicate, I was afraid. I understood that I was about to be subject to the process that humans approximated with the term reincarnation. This was why the wheel had come. I represented a kind of discrepancy that had to be fixed. The event, or perhaps the imminent event on the highway, had caused me to slip out of or fall between the paddles on the wheel. This structure had some kind of cosmic purpose of sorting things into their correct natural place. I was afraid, and resisted being sorted. So, the wheel stepped up its aggressive attempts to sort me correctly. With this came another understanding that frightened me even more. I knew that unless I soon selected one of these realities to slide back into, that the wheel would coerce the situation by deciding for me. One way or another, I would be sorted, whether I liked it or not. If I didn't choose for myself, I would simply be fitted into place at some nearest position on the wheel to the point where I failed to make the decision, if that makes sense. I was aware of having a limited ability to choose, but not much. Even that limited ability wasn't much use, because each reality slammed against me and through me, before I could even make much sense of what it contained. Even I did not remain the same from one slot in the wheel to the next. It was as if when each film broke over me, I was destroyed and made again from the ground up, as a completely new self. There was no continuous me that travelled unaltered through that wheel and can somehow report back on this experience. This is just one of the many things that is so very hard to explain about it all. The very idea of a continuous self was contradicted by this experience. I have forgotten, or perhaps it was deliberately suppressed, the vast majority of what I saw in the various universes or paddles of the wheel. At the beginning, they seemed very similar to this world we inhabit, or believe ourselves to inhabit. For example, I have a floating memory of seeing various different scenarios of how the accident played out. I suspect that these were all nearby paddles on the wheel. In one of them, I remember seeing what looked like my vehicle thrown right off the road and so badly damaged that it looked like it had been folded in the centre like a pocket knife. I seem to recall many other scenarios like this that I can no longer remember. To clarify, what I mean is that I seem to file or flip through numerous conceivable, quantum, possibilities for the outcome of the accident. I can remember doing this,
but I cannot remember what any of these particular worlds contained. I have no explanation for why I failed to experience any of the phenomena usually reported with the imminent death situations, like the tunnel, the light, and so on and so forth. I suspect that imminent death experiences are symbolic scenarios that flash up just as soon as someone is entering or exiting the wheel, but before the situation has developed very far. At no stage at all did I see anything that resembled what we humans would think of as an afterlife or spirit world or life after death realm. It's as if we are either on the outer surface of the wheel itself, in one of its realized worlds, or else we are dead and we are the wheel itself. The wheel is a space where all uncreated possibility exists, but nothing completed or actual. And bear in mind that nothing was concealed from me at all. I was the all, and knew the all. I certainly don't retain it or pretend to, but I did know it back then. I began to grow extremely panicked. Each time I thought I was just beginning to get a handle on things, I would be slapped over violently and ruthlessly into a new slot in the wheel, and a whole new me would crystallise, along with all the memories and assumptions that went along with that world. I remembered none of who I was just a moment ago in another paddle on the wheel. I had no memory whatsoever of where I had come from or the highway situation in my world. I had zero memory of that world at all. I knew I had come from a somewhere, but I had no recollection of where that was or even who I was. It was just about the most bizarre thing that you could ever imagine. Somehow though, and I can only assume that it happened without any conscious action on my part, the possibilities appearing in the wheel began to narrow down and become somewhat more familiar again. Scenarios associated with the accident began to appear once more. Well, I say once more, but I've no real way of knowing whether this was a separate incidence of this to what I described above, or whether it was really the same incidence because time was functioning so unusually during the whole episode. Again, I saw, or seemed to see, variations of possible world outcomes where I died in the crash. I seemed to understand intuitively that if I went into any of these, I would be there for only a few moments or minutes at most. And then, I would have to come out and face the wheel again, almost immediately. I didn't want to do this, but there was an odd kind of knowing associated with that too. The wheel didn't seem bothered one way or the other. It didn't seem to matter to it whether I emerged again in 3 minutes' time, or 3 decades' time. All it cared about was sorting me, and there was a kind of ruthlessness to this that I will not soon forget. I found myself back on the highway, in what seemed to be a very short distance back up the road, still approaching the intersection. This is just one of the many mysteries associated with the event that I cannot explain. Did I choose a world which was a version of our universe in which the accident hadn't quite happened yet, but was just seconds away from happening? I can't say, because I have no memory of making that decision. I remember the look on that driver's face as clearly as if it were yesterday. I remember him bracing back on the wheel. But I braked as I reached the intersection, and that driver or his car was simply nowhere to be seen.
Kayaking trip drug-free. A near-death out-of-body experience by Elliot H. Uploaded to Irrowid, October 1st, 2019. So there I was in a kayak in Broad River. It was my first time kayaking, and I was nervous as fuck about the whole ordeal. I was only 12 years old, camping out with friends in the middle of bumfuck South Carolina. I didn't want to go. I hated a good bit of the people I was with, but it certainly beat staying at home with my poor excuse for a family. But enough about me. Let's get to my experience. I had just entered the river on my kayak, and I was starting to get the hang of it already. The water was very calm, and it would have been a peaceful scene if not for the drunken rednecks behind me. But it was still a nice feeling. I mean, I've always loved the water. So I'm drifting down the river, actually a good bit down the river now. I can't see the dock from where I'm at anymore. I'm paddling along like the instructor told me to, and the water seems so serene. And then just like that, the bottom drops out from under me. I couldn't mentally grasp what had just happened until my boat had flipped over, and I was raking my head against the rocks below. Yeah, not a good feeling. I mean, I'm a big guy, and I was very large for a 12-year-old, but the water was so deep that I was still completely under. My kayak was on top of me, and I was having enough trouble trying to keep my head from hitting the rocks over and over. Apparently, it's really fucking hard to hold your breath while you're upside down, underwater, with that much weight on top of you. I had my hands above my head, pushing myself up, because I was so worried about hitting my head on the rocks. The current had been dragging me for at least 2 minutes, or that's what it felt like anyway, and I wasn't able to get the kayak from on top of me. Instinctively, I opened my mouth and tried to scream out for someone to get the goddamn weight off me. Dumbass move. Instead of things coming out, things went in, and into my lungs. I had already sustained lung damage from birth, and that coupled with how overweight I was, I guess my body tried to take in air even when I didn't want to. Needless to say, I only took in water. I immediately regretted my body's decision. I can't really describe how it felt. It wasn't comfortable, that's for damn sure. It felt awful. But then the awful started to ease, and I started to become less concerned with getting the kayak off of me. And then this euphoria started to set in. I wasn't scared of drowning or anything, I just felt really good and at ease and wanted to enjoy the feeling. I hadn't started experimenting with drugs yet, but I figured, at the time, that that's what it felt like to be high. It was like I was in a different world, and I don't want to be so cliche, but I'm telling the honest truth. My life kind of flashed before my eyes. All the memories I had, and some I didn't have, just played back in my mind, and it was like I was looking at myself from a different point of view. I saw myself upside down, drowning, but happy as fuck. It's like I could see my own life, if that makes sense, from a different point of view, a spiritual point of view. It was as if I was dreaming, and then I woke up. I saw light and the nature around the river, and then I saw my friend Mike, who was much older than me, lifting me by the shirt. "You okay, buddy?" he said. I wanted to say, "Do I look like I'm fucking okay?" But then I realised I still couldn't breathe. I eventually coughed out all the water and was able to talk. Out of breath, but I caught it quickly, and I told him thank you. We pulled over on a sandy place on the side of the river so I could get my shit together. He said I was only under for a few minutes, but I swear to God, it felt like an eternity. We couldn't go back, and I had to kayak the rest of the river, which was scary as hell. I'm thankful for Mike saving my life, but I can't say I don't wish I was back at this place. To experience that same euphoria and then just cease living, it doesn't really sound too bad. But now, I won't swim in a lake or river, and I'm certainly never going kayaking again. But I'm glad I had this experience, because it's opened me up to a lot of things about my own spirituality, sexuality, and really made me contemplate my entire existence. It's helped me to become a better person. I was very confused after it happened, but I learnt afterwards that I'd just gone through a near-death experience. I've pretty much come to terms with it now, but I was very fucked up for a month or two afterwards. It happened when I was working at a construction site carrying bricks, as I was financially responsible for my family at a young age. It was the early morning, and I was carrying bricks on my back and going up the zigzag stairs made temporarily against the outer wall of the 4-storey building, when I fell with the bricks to the bottom. Afterwards, I was lying on a bed covered with a white sheet over my face, and I saw my younger sister collapsed and wailing on the ground. Simultaneously, I was going up in the sky and saw the city of Seoul. Over in the distance there was a commercial airplane getting ready to land at the airport, and I went in and flew around on top of the heads of the passengers and looked around, even inside the cockpit. Then, I looked at the Christ the Redeemer statue at Rio de Janeiro, the Eiffel Tower, London Bridge, Sydney Opera House, and places around Hong Kong. Suddenly, I saw in front of me images like a movie, playing everything I had ever done in my life, from the time I was too young to remember any of them. When I was shown times when I had stolen a radish from a field because I was hungry, when I swore at someone, when I spat on the ground, and hitting my younger siblings, etc. I felt tremendous pain in my heart when those actions were displayed in front of me. I remember vividly trying to avoid watching it, but it was to no avail. While watching those scenes, I felt repentance for the bad actions I had taken deeply from my bones. Like being blown by a strong wind, I was inside a pastel-coloured deep fog which blew me to an extremely clean, bright light in the distance. When I arrived, this colour, like of a baby chick, encompassed me with feelings of extreme peace, and I conversed with an existence that I could not see, and talked with feelings of thought and felt the answers. I knew there was an existence, a being, that was in the distance but could not see. I had no physical body. I just existed inside extreme peace with great sounding music coming from somewhere. Suddenly, I remembered my siblings and thought of wanting to see them, and as soon as I thought this, I was with my siblings in our hut, and while looking at their faces, I felt nothing. As soon as I thought of a place, I was instantaneously there, and while listening to the stories inside the bright light, I felt and realised that it was love. I saw overwhelming lights of fireworks in the darkness outside a window. I wanted to go and see it, so I struggled off the bed I was lying on and fell to the floor. My body felt limp like it had no bones, and I couldn't make any sounds to ask for help. Don't know how long I was on the cold floor for, but someone laid me back on my back, and it was then that I was told that I returned from the morgue. When I was discharged from the hospital, I was known as the child that died and came back to life, so the hospital deputy director and the nurses all came out and sent me off. While I was resting at home, I would see things that are hidden in people that are walking on the streets, the thoughts that they have in their hearts and where their hurt lies. Knowing what people were thinking as they passed me was fun at first, but seeing it continuously became difficult. Several years later, I went on a business trip with 3 senior work colleagues to Hong Kong. I was able to successfully guide them around from the time we were on the plane, as I had seen it all before. When we arrived in Hong Kong, I remembered a fruit stall in a small alley behind the hotel we were staying at and purchased a bunch of bananas to the amazement of my colleagues. When I go overseas, I am able to go around like a local because I recognise the streets I saw during the experience. Even now, I am able to see people differently, and after retirement, I am currently lecturing around giving talks on life and death. I am working hard to bring to the public discussions of life after death and the meaning of dying well. I remember the 4 hours it took me to get to surgery. My wife said I was in excruciating pain, but I do not remember any pain. I remember telling her I couldn't feel my legs anymore, and then I couldn't feel my left arm. I knew I was dying. I remember signing my own consent form. I finally was wheeled to the operating room. I left the earthly realm and entered into an alternate reality. I saw a lagoon that was surrounded by beautiful plants. Everything was soft to the touch. There were 4 or 5 entities who were present, but I could not see them. They assured me that everything would be alright and that I could leave any time I wanted. They told me that this place was for me, and it contained all the unconditional love I had for others and that they had for me. I did leave that place once, but then came back. I asked why everything was soft, and was told that the energy that binds matter here is that of unconditional love. I laid down on the ground. The energy embraced me, and the profound healing power of unconditional love healed me. One of the doctors on the team that worked on me came to see me once I was alert. The doctor was very nervous around me, and told me that she felt like she was in the presence of a saint, because I should be dead, and nobody can explain how I survived. In surgery, I had a dissected aortic arch that ruptured into my chest. During the aortic repair, my brain was completely drained of blood and filled with cryogenic fluid. They used a new technique that is recommended for 60 to 90 minutes maximum. Yet my brain was frozen for 100 minutes. I suffered 10 brain clots and stroked at some time during surgery. My entire frontal lobe was a continuous bruise. After a thorough brain scan, the doctor asked me how I was doing. I told her that I was home from the hospital and started to do a lot of things. The doctor informed me that people with as much brain injury as I had don't even get out of bed. Yet I felt fine, except for some dizzy spells. It has been 5 months now, and I can run 12 miles. I'm a bit emotional, but doing very well. I feel I have gained great insights into the nature of the universe, life, and its purpose. Reborn from the Cosmic Womb. A near-death experience report by Mira Sai from the Near Death Experience Research Foundation.org. My name at the time was Artie, and I was a very successful financial consultant. When I had purchased my white 560 SL Mercedes convertible in 1988 or 89, can't remember which year, these words had popped into my head. You will die in this car. Of course, I didn't give any credence to this thought at the time. But today, after almost 6 years, those words seem to be repeating themselves to me. Just before death, July 30th, 1994. That morning I had driven about 400 miles with my secretary from San Francisco for a couple of meetings with some clients. For some reason throughout that day I had been feeling somewhat uneasy, like this was a premonition of sorts. So I had been in a quiet prayer mode the whole day. I had been invited by one of my clients in the city of Glendora for their 80-year-old mother's birthday celebration. Afterwards it was almost 11:30 PM by the time I was able to call it a day and leave for the hotel. I had thought that I would tell my secretary I was extremely tired, and it would be better if she was the one to drive back to San Francisco after the birthday party. As destiny would have it, I was so tired I forgot to tell her, while very mechanically getting into the driver's seat. Seatbelts were not mandatory in 1994. Without bothering to put on my seatbelt, I started the car and began driving. After about 10 minutes on the road, a car with 2 young boys was driving in the left lane. Suddenly it swerved to the right, coming into my lane right in front of me, then stopping abruptly at the stop sign that was just ahead. I had nowhere to go, so I slammed on the brakes, or so I thought. In my immediate shock and sleepy exhaustion, I had pressed down on the accelerator instead. The 560 SL is designed to go from 0 miles per hour to 60 miles per hour within seconds, and that's just what it did. I shot forward at full speed, and crash. In that moment of impact I felt my whole body lift up, fly forward with great force and hitting something. Next thing I knew, I was seeing this white stream of light travelling inside my body, which also filled with a brilliant electric white light. It looked like light travelling in light. As I looked at this moving light energy, I realised I was also experiencing it. This powerful white energy which was moving from my solar plexus towards the top of my head. I was moving very fast, yet simultaneously I appeared to be moving very slowly. Somehow it seemed very natural for my movement to be slow and fast at the same time. Was I in perfect balance? There was no sense of duality. I knew that this light energy was my prana, otherwise called life force. The prana was moving upwards through my body, almost as if being pulled by some sort of magnetic power above my head. Just then I experienced a sinking feeling, very much like one feels when beginning the plunge down a roller coaster. I felt myself go into a gentle convulsion with an upward movement. The next moment, it was all gone. There was no light, no body or anything. It was the strangest feeling and yet so familiar. It was as though I had experienced it many times before. Without the body, I found myself floating in a dark void. I was totally confused as to where I was and what was really happening. All I could see was total darkness everywhere, but I wasn't afraid. At a distance, I saw a pale golden vehicle-like thing in the shape of a small boat. The boat was brilliant in its golden hue, and it was coming towards me. The centre hollow portion of this golden boat seemed to be filled with that same shimmering, brilliant white light I had seen inside my body. As it moved closer, I could see in the centre on its bed of white light that there was a very ethereal human body. The body was lying very still on its back, draped in a pale golden gown and glowing gloriously in the dark night. It was a magnificent sight to behold. As it came closer, my entire being went into shock when I saw the face of this body. It was me. Oh my God, I realised. I'm dead. I was completely jolted by this truth. I looked at myself for the first time and saw I had no body. I was just a spark of light and was now linked to this sparkling boat. Almost immediately, the golden boat tilted upwards with the feet of the motionless body pointing upwards and head below it. The boat transported me faster than the speed of light, almost like a thunderbolt slicing through the dark night and disappearing into the void. Almost as if I had fully woken up after a long sleep, I found myself surrounded by an all-pervasive brilliance. There was no boat, no body structure, no dark void, nothing. There was only this dazzling, electrifying, brilliant white light all around. The light was everywhere. There was nothing except this brilliant consciousness. It seemed to have a consistency of the ever finest, minutest electric-like sparkles, and was energetically similar to the bed of light I had come on, except that this light was all-pervasive and limitless. It could perhaps be compared to the light of thousands of brilliant stars reflected in millions of sparkling diamonds, all-encompassing, self-luminous, and pulsating with electric energy, very delicate and smooth. I seemed to know that the light was the supreme infinite light that is God, the cosmic consciousness. It is truly impossible to describe in mere mortal words this pure love, this vital energy, this infinite light, this supreme absolute consciousness, this presence which is commonly referred to by most of humanity as God or the Creator. It can only be experienced. So please forgive my humble effort with limited vocabulary to try and share what I experienced. At this moment I was literally standing on air and was an electric body of light. I was in this dazzling white void, this brilliant nothingness filled with comfort, delight, and a deep knowing that I had reached my final destination. I seemed to know that this was the ultimate white effulgent light, experiencing myself as a shimmering, sparkling white light energy, pulsating with some kind of ethereal, ethereal, electric life force. My being was flooded with a gentle, very expansive love energy. The energy was like a soft embrace from that all-encompassing light presence. This light presence of pure, unconditional love seemed to be in me and around me. It was all-pervasive and extended into infinity. Strangely, there seemed to be no difference between this light and my light being. Even more bewildering was that this conscious loving presence seemed to be the nature and substance of all of existence. In sheer delight, my light self was almost skipping in the air as a further wave of knowing passed through me. I whispered to myself, "This is the real me," in complete wonderment, with a sense of déjà vu and awe. I heard myself say, "I know this place. I know this place. I've been here before. I made it. I finally made it back." Drinking in the nectar of the loving presence which enfolded me, I saw with complete amazement a very interesting transference starting to happen. There was a string of atoms starting to flow out from within the left side of my electric body, and they disappeared upwards into nowhere. Almost as if from thin air, a much finer frequency of atoms seemed to be appearing and were entering through my right side into this same electric light body. I was watching and experiencing at the same time, again with no sense of duality. My entire being was being totally emptied, refueled and reprogrammed with this ethereal, orderly interchange of atoms. I saw that the new entry was made of a vastly different energy and seemed to have a much more expansive and delicate DNA energy. It had a new wave of very lightweight, subtle cellular frequencies as they spiraled in, expanding and changing the previous electric body formation. All of the above was happening very fast, and yet seemed to take an eternity. Enfolded in the comforting wrap of pure divine love during this cellular exchange, it seemed as though I was gradually disappearing with the atoms leaving this electric light body. Almost as if another me was birthing through the newer, finer atoms entering into this light form. My whole being was cleansed and purified, making it ready for its next role in God's divine drama. I wished to take a final look and say goodbye to the world I had just left behind. I looked over behind my non-existent shoulder, somehow expecting to see my world, but to my complete shock I saw that there was nothing there. My earthly world didn't seem to exist. There was no world, no universe, no galaxy, no earth. Nothing. Nothing existed except this soft, conscious presence, this pulsating brilliance, this pure love that was everywhere as all pure white light. Oh my God, how could that be? I exclaimed to myself. Where has it gone? What about all I went through as Artie? It was all real. How could it have just disappeared? A gentle response seemed to come from the cosmic wisdom that was all around. But how could it be real when it has just disappeared? There was so much knowledge that was shared with me that I can't share it all here. The response said, "What is real is only that which is permanent and changeless. That which changes is within the mirage of time and truly non-existent. Consciousness, however, as a gentle, delicate, smooth, flowing process is ever present, even within the human form, above and beyond the mind, as it is the experiencelessness underlying all experience. It never changes, never disappears, and it is therefore the only reality." I asked, "But if this consciousness alone is real, the world was an illusion? Then where did it come from?" It replied with, "Like all manifestation, the world too is the creation of the great illusion or great delusion, which being the creative aspect of this supreme consciousness, or the Lord, is the divine movie projector of life, in the all-powerful play of the realm of creation. Just as a mirage in the desert disappears when viewed from a certain perspective, your life as Artie on earth has disappeared, when viewed from the perspective of the divine self, where you are now. Only the eternal is real, and from the viewpoint of that reality, all that is non-eternal disappears. Yet of course, you, being eternal Atman, the soul, can still view the world of illusion if you wish." I asked, "So my life as Artie never really existed at all? It was an illusion?" It replied, "Oh, it existed, but just as a dream exists, or a movie, or a mirage." I continued questioning. So the world was just a figment of my imagination? How did I create it? With my thoughts and desires? The reply echoed all around me. "Yes." as it reverberated within my being. Yes, I understood now. The world had all been only in my mind. A thought and senses created illusion and delusion. Without the senses, mind and body, there was now no ego to perceive the world illusion. It had all existed and happened only in my mind. Our true reality exists outside of the mind, which is where I was at the present moment. I realised the true vastness of my being and the minuscule nature of the cage of the earthly body. The roles I had played through the many lifetime dramas with different bodies flashed again into knowing. I smiled, seeing there was absolutely no attachment whatsoever to any of them. How could I, when it was just a play of mind? I had come to terms with the fact that once my ego consciousness, left the body, my mind-created world also disappeared. Universal laws seemed to unfold rapidly and poured into my entire electric wave body. I realised that the real goal of the mind-created life game was to remove the veil of delusion and ignorance and reach the ultimate truth of one's reality in life itself. This truth, this self I was bathing in and which had encompassed my being, was nothing but love. The truth was love. Pure, unconditional, universal love that is almost non-achievable in human terms. It was the fabric of this consciousness of which I was part. Yes, because love is God and God is love. It was very clear that the cosmic composition was made up of nothing but love. Love is the God glue that is holding all together. I realised I was not just inside the love, but rather one with it. This universal body of love, of God. This was completely natural to me, as flame is to fire because it is fire. This was home, and I wanted to be here forever. Immediately with the emergence of this thought wish, the ego wave that was Artie seemed to gracefully meld into the Supreme Presence, dissolving into that ocean of love. Artie as the earthly Artie was no more. An incredible wave of freedom splashed over my being, almost like coming out scrubbed fresh and clean after a long overdue bath. The cellular interchange of atoms with their spiralling exit and entry had stopped because reprogramming of my electric light body was completed. I was birthing a new life later known as Mira S. I knew without a doubt that life on Earth was just a playground of experience, an assignment from God, a mirror projection of the divine. In each new lifetime, as the soul makes spiritual progress, its vibrational frequency gets tuned to a faster, higher, and finer level depending upon its degree of evolution. The transformation continues until the frequency level is fine-tuned to such a degree that it connects with the frequency of the cosmos itself, which then allows it to gain entry into cosmic consciousness, one's true self, which is eternal bliss, otherwise known as Ananda. In the light presence, everything and anything could be readily created or manifested. It was in the nature of this supreme presence. Everyone and everything, anywhere, was right here where I was, present in the seemingly invisible now. One just had to think and it was available. The transmutation within my electric body being completed, the electric body too, was no more visible because there was complete oneness. It was infinite to such a degree that I was no more, and yet I was that consciousness. There was nothing else and no other. Oh dear God, that is all that exists, the only being that is. That consciousness was all around, inside, outside, above, below. It was everywhere, the all. As one touched by the philosopher's stone, which is said to transform iron into gold, I had gone through a complete transformation and transmutation of the previous self into birthing a new higher self. I was bringing with it an immediate awakening into the knowing of universal truths and the reality of Supreme Self. This magnificent, all-pervasive effulgence was so glorious. It was true. There is only one being, one God, and that is the true self of all. All are just a reflection of God. All are that one. I too was that one. That is my reality. I was brimming, overflowing with the supreme knowing that the Supreme Being is my own true self, my true identity. It was here, now, and always. There is no past or future. It is all happening constantly in the now. Losing it all, dissolving. I am that I am. Ahman Brahmamsi. I knew that I was, and I am all there was to know. Just like myself, all of creation wherever and however it existed, whether human, animal, mammal, plant or nature, all were full in themselves. All were and are God, a beautiful, glorious expression of that same fullness. Creation was just divinity experiencing itself through its creation. I was bathing in consciousness, as consciousness. I was enjoying this bliss of union with the absolute divine self, God, and full with wholeness of being. I wanted only to remain as this cosmic being forever. I never want to be separate again from this oneness, this all-encompassing love. This was my feeling as a faint memory of the world of separateness wafted into my consciousness, and anxiousness seemed to take over all of a sudden. I heard myself repeat twice, "Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here?" By the formation of destiny, which is created by our actions and reactions, the newly transformed being of myself now in existence, having received a downpour of higher truths and realizing its higher self from having merged in oneness with it, I knew that it had been brought within and as the pure energy of that one, of pure white light for a reason, so an element of wonderment was there at what might be coming next. Much to my dismay, however, the all-pervasive knowing came through with a much different response than what I was expecting. Coming loud and clear, it reverberated through that infinite space of consciousness. You have to go back. You have to do the work. Communicating that my real work on earth was to begin now. I called out, "Please, I don't want to go back. I'm very happy here." But the Lord's supreme consciousness had spoken, and it had to be. Right then, I saw a long, flexible kind of tunnel which almost looked like a huge hollow umbilical cord. I could actually see the outside and inside of it. Inside it I saw the form of an unborn human baby, with golden light-coloured skin, curled up like a fetus against the inner wall. So this is the cosmic womb tunnel, I thought. It seemed to be coming from infinity and spiralling downwards. But as I looked at it carefully, I exclaimed in alarm, "Oh no, not again," when I realised that I was that baby, speeding down head first, as the curled up fetus in this cosmic tunnel-like womb. I was crossing the dimensional barriers. I thought, "Oh God, oh no, I really was going back into Earth consciousness to be reborn." Next thing I knew, I heard myself let out a cry. I had opened my human eyes. They were looking in the rear view mirror of a car at a mouth bleeding profusely with the whole lower face covered in blood. In a complete daze, feeling totally disoriented, I touched the face in the mirror and realised it was my mouth. I thought, "Oh God, I have a human body again. really am back. The lower gum bone had been broken and lay flat on my tongue. The 4 lower front teeth had come out of their gum sockets, but were still held by their nerves as they sat on my tongue in the middle of the mouth. Upon touching my face, I could feel tiny particles of glass from the shattered windshield all over my upper face, and even my eyelashes. But none, not one, had entered my eyes. Miraculously, despite this gruesome injury in my mouth, I was feeling no pain whatsoever. There was no physical feeling at all. Such was the amazing divine compassion of the Lord. It seemed God had sent me back with the powerful anaesthetic of his all-pervasive cosmic energy, which was keeping me unaware of any pain. I was still consumed within the awareness of that bliss of cosmic consciousness, his pure love energy, and still immersed in that glorious realm of light and that oneness. Body consciousness had not yet set into my awareness. I was still very disoriented, much like an alien in a new place. I was not in touch with the human senses at all. Turning to my right, I saw Artie's secretary in the passenger seat. She seemed to have had a concussion and was moaning softly in pain. Since she had her seatbelt on, she was unhurt except for a few bruises. Wanting to wipe the pouring blood from my mouth, I seemed to see without seeing, as I automatically reached into the back of the side pocket of the car door and pulled out a napkin. Gently wiping some of the blood from around my broken mouth, my mind wasn't thinking clearly. I was perfectly calm, almost as if all was well and that nothing was broken. Trying to open the car door, I found it jammed. Since this was a 2-door convertible, I reached over the other seat, opening the passenger door and climbed over the secretary, squeezing myself out and finally standing in the fresh outside air. It was a balmy night, with a nice soft breeze that almost seemed to be welcoming me back to the world. I saw a car standing in the distance with 2 young boys excitedly talking with each other. Another car pulled over, followed by bright lights as a police car drove onto the scene. I stood there with a bleeding broken mouth in a total daze, slowly taking in all that was happening outside and inside of me. Soon the policeman came over to me and started asking questions. Since I had no pain and was seemingly unaware of my 4 teeth and broken gums sitting on my tongue, I actually tried to speak, but all that came out was an unintelligible blubbering sound. I then realised how important the gum bone and front teeth are to speech. The policeman just nodded and proceeded to write down notes for a report, and said an ambulance was on its way. He then looked in on the secretary, who was still concussed. A lady from the house nearby came running towards me and started asking if she could help in some way. She said that if I gave her the telephone number of anyone that I knew, she would be happy to call them for me. Searching inside Artie's handbag in the car, I found Saroj's phone number, the family from where Artie had been before this accident. So I gave that number to the lady. She went away and then came back again bringing a pack of ice and told me to put it on my bleeding mouth. I put it against my mouth for a few seconds. Realising there was no pain, I felt no need for it, so I handed it back to her, shaking my head. I tried to form the words, "No pain, no pain." "But how can that be?" she asked incredulously. "You have broken bones in your mouth and so much bleeding." I tried in vain to convey the words, "The light, the light." Within the next few minutes, Saroj and some of her family members arrived. The ambulance also arrived, taking my secretary and my dazed self to the nearest hospital. Saroj and her sister-in-law Kamal drove behind the ambulance and came to the hospital also. Upon arrival at the hospital, the staff apologised for not giving me painkillers. They wanted to take x-rays and the medicine would hinder that in some way. But it didn't matter to me because I still didn't need them. No dental surgeon was on duty late Saturday night, so they had to send out for him, telling me that it might be somewhat of a wait. They took me immediately for x-rays. As I was being rolled away, I saw the secretary being rolled to another area. Saroj and Kamal were waiting as my stretcher was wheeled out of the x-ray room and followed me to my hospital room. Very lovingly and meticulously they stood and removed every tiny particle of the shattered windshield glass from my face and eyelashes. Amazing how my sweet Lord had taken care to protect my eyes. At this point my heart was filled with deep, soul-stirring gratitude towards the loving Lord of the universe. More so as I had come down with total awareness of his presence and truth. It was as if the universal supreme consciousness I had been bathed in was very gently and lovingly taking care of every detail of my safe return. It was very clearly with me, and in me even now. After Saroj and Kamal had left, about 1 or 2 hours later, the dental surgeon also arrived. By then I had spewed out large quantities of blood in a bowl they had provided. Since my consciousness was still immersed in the joy and bliss of the light, I was still in absolutely no pain. This was a good 4 hours or more since the accident and injury. God was making sure I remained in that cosmic state of blissful unawareness of body, mind and senses, so as not to feel what would surely have otherwise been excruciating pain. What a miracle. It was some kind of divine anesthesia, a beautiful expression of God's boundless love and compassion to keep away the unimaginable pain of broken bones and loose teeth from me. Again, God's hand was quite evident in the form of the gentle dental surgeon who was now standing by my bed. After looking inside my mouth with a very kind and loving smile on his face, he said, "You know, unfortunately there's no dental equipment in the hospital, so I'm just going to have to use my hands and some wire to temporarily fix your gum bone and teeth. Is that acceptable to you?" Looking at the kindness and warmth emanating from him, I felt very safe and nodded. Yes. He started by giving a few anaesthetic injections within my mouth, thinking I must be in pain and would feel more soon. Then with his fingers he proceeded to lift up my broken gum bone from my tongue and gently made it stand in its place. Then he took the 4 teeth resting on my tongue in my mouth, still attached to the gum by the tiniest of thread-like nerve fibres, and placed them one by one back into their rightful sockets in the same broken gum. With some wire he tied the loose teeth to the solid ones, wiring the gum and teeth together. He asked me to see him for intensive surgery on Monday morning. Since his clinic was closed on Sunday, I had to stay wired up like this for 1 whole day and night. Then he patted me on the back for being so brave and left. The bleeding had stopped and I fell off to sleep, but woke up in the morning almost screaming, for I was experiencing unbelievable deathly pain. It was killer pain. I then truly understood the agony I had been saved from for the last so many hours. Such grace. The nurse came right away and gave some strong medication that made the pain somewhat tolerable. What a lesson the pain had given though. My first lesson on my return into the world. Pain was truly only in the mind too. Right after the accident my mind became non-functional, as I was in a state of higher consciousness. There was no experience of pain, for there is no such thing as pain in that state of being. That is a function of the mind and senses. The senses got activated only after I was drawn back into bodily consciousness, and by the painkillers and the doctors working on my mouth and myself giving attention to it. So it was only a matter of where the mind was focused really. As the saying goes, it's all in the mind. In the state of cosmic consciousness, there was no pain or pleasure. There was no duality, as there was no sense awareness. There is only isness. Everything just is. Awareness of higher self is being a love energy of total equanimity and balance, the peace that passeth understanding. It is a deep samadhi-like state, unaffected by anything or anyone. A state of timeless Satchit Inanda, being, awareness, bliss. In wonderment and gratitude, I thank that Supreme Consciousness for allowing me to know this experientially. On the outside, the accident was something terrible that had happened. In reality, it was a monumental gift of grace the Lord had showered, this precious awareness of Atmic discovery. What a gift through an accident. To take a soul, entangled in human trials and tribulations, out of the human realm altogether through the realm of death and into the supreme light, to reveal to it its eternal self, its divine identity, and there unite it with its real self, the supreme self itself. Precious blessing. Then to bring me back into the human realm, whole within myself, wholly transformed by the supreme light presence of pure unconditional love, filling my being with divine knowledge, to begin life anew, as the life divine. For even as I lay on that bed in the hospital, all wired up and smiling contently, I seemed to almost take on a vow. As I knew, mine would be a sacred life dedicated to the Supreme, to be lived in full knowledge of my true being, and compassionate loving service to all He sent to me. With this knowing, a prayer went out from within myself. I would try to stay within that knowing I had received as conscious awareness. I would walk solely on the legs of truth and righteousness, extending compassion to all with the arms of love and non-violence, and try breathing in and out the peace that pervades the whole universe, the peace of the absolute oneness of all. Gradually, as I shared this knowing and moment by moment tried to see and love the God within all, I would surely lead a blessed life and help in spreading that love and truth of who we really are and the divine power that we all are. The magnificence and pure love and bliss that exist within each and every one of us, and that there is absolutely nothing to fear, especially death, for we are eternal and we never die. That is the core essence of the God Self. Its temporary individual self and all other selves are comprised only of love, love, and love. That God is love and love is God. Continuing to swim in that beloved consciousness, lying on the hospital bed that night, it dawned on me that this is what awareness is. This love, this peace, which seekers of truth here in this world were yearning for. They searched to find that happiness which constantly eluded them. I had to somehow help. That it was my duty to my other selves. After the hospital. Saroj and her family came to pick me up from the hospital that Sunday afternoon. Since I was now back in body consciousness, the excruciating pain continued to be truly unbearable, even with very strong medication. The pain lasted for 5 to 6 days. I went for surgery Monday morning. The surgeon said he either had to remove all the 4 teeth and put in dentures, or at best he would have to do a root canal on all of them. But since the nerves were still attached to the teeth, I assured him that my God would take care of this and to please somehow save the teeth. He hesitated at first, but then agreed, saying it was my responsibility and I would definitely need root canal work on them in 2 to 3 years. I was okay with that though. It took almost 5 hours for the surgery. where he placed a full set of metal caps and wiring on my lower teeth to help them settle back permanently and allow the nerves to heal. Since the teeth setting was very fragile with a broken gum bone not strong enough yet to bite any solid foods, I was supposed to be on a liquid diet until it became strong. I stayed for a week at Soroj's house to recover from the mouth surgery. I then returned to my home in the Bay Area where I lived alone since I was single. For almost 1 year I stayed on mainly Ensure Plus, which is a liquid food, just like I was a newborn baby. Existing in a very different inner world of my own, it might sound strange, but I was still quite disoriented. Everything seemed new, and I was trying to get used to the world around me. Fortunately, nothing seemed to have truly affected me emotionally. I remembered Artie's life but was quite unaffected by it. My lifestyle was almost the opposite of what Artie's had been. My body structure had also changed. Food preferences were different. For example, Artie didn't quite much care for chocolate and ice cream, but I love it. I had somewhat of a singing voice, whereas Artie couldn't really sing too well. I was more of a quiet personality, wanting to keep to myself. I'm very selective of whom I spend time with, whereas Artie had an extrovert personality and was very happy to be mixing in society, attending parties, public relations, and just generally being social. My clothing choices were a bit more conservative too. Interestingly, people around me would say, "There's something different about you after the accident, but we can't tell what it is." I could tell, of course, but they would never understand. On the physical level, if one looked carefully and compared the eyes of Artie and myself in photographs, they were absolutely different from each other. We were almost like twins, but different. My desire for the world and its attractions was very minimal, as I knew it was temporary and not real. Still fresh from the return and wanting to go back there, I decided to go into a world where I could still be in that consciousness, at least some of the time. So in December of 1995, I completely walked away from the high-end lifestyle of Artie, the successful financial consultant. I gave up the properties, the big house, worth approximately $3 to $4 million today, as well as cars and other material possessions. I then left for India, to the ashram of my spiritual master Sai Baba, which was the only abode of peace I knew. My name was officially given by Sai Baba as Mira S in an interview in 1996, after which my disorientation with the world seemed to subside to a great degree, as I finally had some identity of my own. I returned to California after almost 5 years in September 2001, on the day of 9/11. It took 5 days to reach America from India. I stayed with my brother and his family as I had given up my home. In 2002 I went to the Himalayas for a few months, climbing up to 19,500 feet in the snow. When I got back, I went to Stanford University for a while to study child developmental psychopathology. I thought I would try to help juvenile delinquent children. Then I opened a holistic store in San Jose for about a year. I closed it and went into real estate for a few years. I started a non-profit, studied at World University, and was ordained as an ecumenical minister. In 2007 I opened a multi-faith sanctuary in San Jose for 5 years, trying to help people who came there. In 2010 I went back to the Himalayas for about 4 to 5 months, meditating in many sacred caves, bathing in many holy rivers. I came back and was divinely guided to close the sanctuary. Since then I have been spending time in India and the US, trying to finish 2 books. One book is a poetry book of mystical meditations of the knowings which I experienced from the other side. It is almost complete and ready for publishing. Many miraculous events have occurred and continue to occur. I live in wonderment and surrender to that supreme being and his love. Mira S. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all the beings in the worlds be happy. Thank you for spending the time to read this integral part of my life story. Hope you enjoyed that one, guys. That's one of the best things I've ever read out by far. Really touching, emotional and profound story of a near-death experience. Easily the very best I've ever read about. So comprehensive and utterly magnificent in the way it was described. An extreme amount of similarities to the psychedelic experience as well. We're really starting to pin all the dots together now. All of these high-level psychedelic ego-death experiences share so many similarities with near-death experiences. There is truth to be found within this work, and it really is a pathway into universal consciousness. Of course, every person's experience with these chemicals and NDEs are different, but they all seem to be pointing to the highest truth that everything is one, and that we are all universal, unconditional, loving consciousness.